Now I have a deep understanding of the original story's voice, structure, and emotional beats. Let me write a completely new story. I was wrong about one thing. I always assumed that when the truth finally came out, I'd feel some kind of relief, like setting down a heavy box you've carried across a long parking lot. Instead, when it happened, all I felt was tired and sad and very, very alone in a house that still smelled like my wife's perfume. My name is Walter. I'm 63 years old, and 3 weeks before all of this started, I buried my wife of 38 years in the cemetery 2 miles from our house. Carol. Her name was Carol, and she was the only person on earth who knew the whole truth about me. Now she was gone, and the truth had nowhere left to hide. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. My daughter-in-law, Renee, used that particular voice she saved for conversations she'd already rehearsed. Sweet, careful. The kind of voice that sounds like concern but feels like a closing argument. "Walter, we've been thinking about you so much," she said. "It must be so hard rattling around in that big house all by yourself. Marcus and I were talking, and we just feel like you shouldn't have to deal with all of that alone." I was standing in my kitchen, looking at the coffee mug Carol had used every morning for 15 years, the one with the chipped handle she refused to throw away because her mother had given it to her. "That's kind of you," I said, "so we'd love for you to come to dinner on Saturday. Just family. We want to talk about some things going forward. Make sure you're taken care of." Taken care of. I recognized those words the way you recognize the smell of rain before it starts. Something was coming. I said I'd be there. My son Marcus had married Renee 11 years ago in a ceremony that cost more than I'd spent on my first 3 real estate acquisitions combined. Renee came from money, which meant she thought she understood money, which meant she understood almost nothing about it. Marcus had become someone I barely recognized in the decades since that wedding. He still had my father's jawline and Carol's eyes, but somewhere along the way he'd traded his mother's warmth for Renee's particular brand of performance. He wore his success the way some men wear cologne. Too much, and you notice it before you notice anything else. Their house was 40 minutes north of mine, in one of those developments where every lawn is identical and the homeowners association sends letters if your mailbox is the wrong shade of beige. I drove there in my truck, the same blue Ford F-150 I'd been driving for 8 years, the one Marcus had once suggested I replace because it was embarrassing to park in his driveway. I brought flowers for the table. Carol always said you should bring something. Renee answered the door in a cream-colored blouse that probably cost what most people spent on groceries in a month. She hugged me with both arms, which she almost never did, which told me everything I needed to know about how the evening was going to go. My son was in the living room with a man I didn't recognize, mid-40s, sharp suit, the kind of haircut that comes with a waiting list. "Dad," Marcus said, standing to shake my hand. "This is Raymond Holt. He's a financial consultant we've been working with." I looked at Raymond Holt. Raymond Holt smiled at me like I was a problem he already knew how to solve. "Your son has told me a great deal about you, Walter. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I said. I set the flowers on the entry table because no one had offered to take them. I didn't realize this was that kind of dinner. "Let's sit down," Renee said quickly, gesturing toward the dining room. The table was set beautifully. Carol would have admired it. There were candles and the good plates Renee kept in a cabinet and only brought out when she was trying to impress someone. My grandchildren, Lily and Ben, were noticeably absent. I'd expected to see them. I'd actually been looking forward to it. "Where are the kids?" I asked. "They're at Renee's mother's tonight," Marcus said, not quite meeting my eyes. So it was going to be that kind of conversation. The kind that shouldn't have children present. We made it through the salad before Renee folded her hands on the table and gave me the look she'd clearly been practicing. "Walter, we love you. And this is coming from a place of genuine concern." She paused the way people do when they've rehearsed a pause. "With Carol gone and the house and everything you're managing on your own, we've been worried. You're not as young as you used to be." "None of us are," I said. Marcus cleared his throat. "What Renee means is that we think it might be time to talk about your living situation. The house is a lot to maintain. The yard, the repairs. Carol used to help with all of that. Carol used to help with all of that. Carol used to help with all of that." Carol had been gone for 23 days, and already her contributions to my life were being itemized. "I manage fine," I said. Raymond Holt, who had been quiet through the salad, chose this moment to earn his consulting fee. "Walter, I've done some preliminary research on senior living communities in your area. There's a wonderful place called Bridgewood Estates about 30 minutes from here. Independent living, so you'd have your own apartment, but with support services available, communal dining, organized activities, a medical staff on site." I looked at him for a moment. Then I looked at my son. "You hired someone to research nursing homes for me." "They prefer senior communities," Renee said. "Marcus." I kept my voice level. "You had someone research places to put me before you even asked me how I was doing." Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable, but Renee pressed forward the way she always did, like a river that had decided on its direction. "Walter, we're being practical. The house is worth a considerable amount now, the market being what it is. If you sold it, you'd have more than enough to live very comfortably in a place like Bridgewood. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." There it was. The house. Carol's house, the house where we'd raised our son, where we'd built a life out of 38 years of ordinary Tuesdays and weekend projects and arguments about where to hang pictures. They wanted to sell it. "And what would you do with the proceeds?" I asked. "After I've paid for Bridgewood Estates?" Something flickered across Renee's face. Just briefly, like a card turned over too quickly. "Well, there'd be estate planning to consider," Raymond Holt said smoothly. "Tax implications, asset management. It would be wise to have professionals involved. Professionals they'd chosen, assets they'd manage, an estate they'd plan. Dad." Marcus leaned forward, and for just a moment he looked like the boy he used to be, before the suits and the development and the careful distance he'd put between himself and the father who drove a used truck and worked with his hands. "We just want what's best for you." "I know you think that's true," I said. I finished my dinner. It was good, actually. Renee was an excellent cook, whatever else could be said about her. I stayed for coffee and listened to Raymond Holt explain 3 different models of estate management, none of which applied to my actual situation in any way he understood. On the drive home, I called the only person I should have called first. Patricia Simmons had been my attorney for 31 years. She'd helped me structure my first LLC in 1994, helped me navigate 3 major acquisitions, helped Carol and me establish our family trust in 2017. She was 71 now and still working 3 days a week because, as she told me, retirement was for people who didn't love what they did. She answered on the second ring. "Walter, I wondered when you'd call. You've been watching the news?" "I've been watching a great many things since Carol passed. How are you holding up?" "My son just had a financial consultant present a PowerPoint about senior living communities at what I thought was a family dinner." A pause. "I see. They want to sell the house." "Of course they do." She said it without judgment, the way a doctor names a diagnosis. "Come see me tomorrow morning. We have things to talk about. I want to explain something about how I came to be who I am, because none of what happened next makes sense without it. I grew up in Decatur, Illinois, the son of a man who worked the line at the Staley plant, and a woman who cleaned offices 3 nights a week to make ends meet. We weren't poor in the way that makes news. We were poor in the quiet, grinding way that just means nothing is ever quite enough, and you spend your whole childhood learning to want less. I was good at math. Specifically, I was good at seeing patterns in numbers that other people missed, the way some kids can hear a song once and play it back on any instrument. My high school math teacher, a patient man named Mr. Garrison, told me I thought about numbers the way poets thought about words. I didn't know what to do with that at 17, but I stored it away. I worked construction through my 20s. Honest work, physical work, the kind that teaches you exactly what things cost, because you're the one building them. I married Carol when we were both 24, in a ceremony at her parents' church, with 40 guests and a cake her mother made. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and Carol was the kind of woman who could make much out of almost nothing. The first property I ever bought was a derelict duplex on the east side of our city. 1991. I paid $62,000 for it using every cent we'd saved and a personal loan from Carol's uncle, who made me shake his hand and look him in the eye before he signed the check. I fixed it up myself, nights and weekends, Carol bringing me sandwiches while Marcus played in the yard. Rented both units, bought another property 18 months later, then another. The thing about real estate is that it rewards patience above almost everything else. It also rewards anonymity. When you walk into a negotiation looking like the kind of man who drives a used truck and eats lunch at diners, people underestimate you, and that underestimation is worth more than any business school degree I never got. By the time Marcus graduated high school, I owned 37 properties across 4 states. By the time he married Renee, it was 91, plus 2 commercial developments and a stake in a self-storage company that turned out to be the most boring and profitable investment I ever made. Carol and I made a decision early on that the money would stay invisible. We'd seen what happened to people when everyone knew what they had. Her own cousin, a decent man, had won a regional lottery in 1998, and by 2004 was broke, divorced, and estranged from half his family. The money had destroyed him. The knowledge of the money had destroyed everyone around him. So we lived the way we'd always lived. The same house, the same truck, the same Saturday morning routine of farmers markets and hardware stores and breakfast at the place on Clement Street where the coffee was bad, but the eggs were perfect. Marcus grew up thinking we were comfortable but not wealthy. He went to state school, which we paid for, and then to a perfectly good law firm, where he worked his way up through genuine ability and worked even harder once Renee came along with her particular ambitions. I was proud of him. I stayed proud of him. Even as he changed, even as he started using words like optics and pivoting and circling back, because beneath all of it, I could still see the kid who used to sit on my lap while I watched baseball and ask me to explain the infield fly rule. He just didn't know who his father really was. Neither did Renee, which was how she'd managed to sit across from me at that dinner table and tell me, in her perfectly managed voice, that it might be time to consider my options. Patricia's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown that she'd occupied since before I met her. She was sitting behind her desk when I arrived, 2 cups of coffee already poured, a folder open in front of her. "Sit down, Walter." I sat. "First, how are you really doing? Not the lawyer conversation, the real one." I thought about Carol's coffee mug with a chipped handle. I thought about the way her reading glasses were still on the nightstand because I hadn't been able to move them. "I'm getting through it," I said. Patricia nodded. She'd lost her own husband 6 years ago. She understood what getting through it actually meant. "All right." She opened the folder. "Here's where things stand. Your trust is solid. Carol's passing triggers the survivor provisions we set up, which means your assets are fully consolidated under your sole management now. No one can touch anything without your explicit authorization. Marcus and Renee don't know that. No, they know what you've always let them know, which is essentially nothing." She paused. Walter, I have to ask you directly, do you want to keep it that way? I thought about that dinner. The candles and the good plates and the PowerPoint about Bridgewood Estates. The flowers I'd brought that were still sitting on the entry table when I left because nobody had thought to put them in water. Not anymore, I said. Good. She turned to the second page of the folder. Because I've been thinking about Carol's wishes, and I think she'd agree with me that it's time to get everything structured properly. Not reactively, not angrily, deliberately. We spent 2 hours in that office. By the end of it, I had a plan. The call came 4 days later on a Thursday afternoon, while I was in the backyard doing exactly what Renee had suggested I couldn't manage on my own, raking leaves. It was Marcus. He skipped the pleasantries this time. Dad, Raymond has put together some materials on the Bridgewood situation. We'd like to go over them with you this weekend. Renee thinks it might be good to bring the kids, make it a real family day, and then we can sit down and go through the paperwork. Bring the kids. Like a sweetener in medicine. What paperwork, Marcus? Just some initial documents. Nothing binding. Raymond wants to start the process of getting power of attorney established while you're in a strong position to make decisions. He says it's much easier to set up proactively than reactively. Power of attorney. Proactively. So that was the play. I appreciate the thought, I said, but I've already been in touch with Patricia Simmons. A pause. Your old lawyer? Dad, she's primarily a real estate attorney. What we're talking about requires someone who specializes in elder law and estate management. Elder law. I was 63 years old and had managed a portfolio that would make Raymond Holt's eyes water, and my son was suggesting I needed an elder law specialist. Patricia handles all my affairs, I said. She has for 30 years. All your affairs. Marcus's voice had a careful quality now, like someone walking across ice. What affairs exactly? Dad, I know you've had some rental properties over the years, but come for dinner Sunday, I said. Just you and Renee, I'll cook. Another pause. What about Raymond? Just family, I said. I'll see you at 6. I made Carol's pot roast, the real version, the one that takes 4 hours and fills the whole house with a smell that used to mean home to everyone who walked through our door. I set the table the way she taught me, cloth napkins, the good glasses, candles. When Marcus and Renee arrived, I could see Renee doing a quick inventory of the house the way she always did, cataloging, assessing, calculating what everything might fetch at market. Marcus looked tired and a little guilty, which told me some part of him already knew what he'd agreed to participate in. We ate dinner and talked about ordinary things. Lily's school play, Ben's baseball team, a kitchen renovation Renee was planning that seemed to involve relocating several walls. The pot roast was good. Not as good as Carol's, but close enough to make me miss her in the particular, specific way that comes with familiar things. After dinner, I brought out the coffee and set a folder on the table. I asked Patricia to put together a summary, I said, since you're concerned about my affairs. Marcus reached for the folder. His eyes moved across the first page slowly. Then he stopped. Then he went back to the top and read it again. Dad, he said. His voice had changed completely. The careful, professional quality was gone. He sounded 23 years old. What is this? A summary of my assets, I said. As of last quarter, Renee had been watching Marcus's face, and now she took the folder from him. I watched the same thing happen to her that had happened to him. The reading, the stop, the return to the beginning. This can't be right, she said in a voice stripped of everything except genuine shock. It's right. These properties. She was turning pages now, her composure fractured in a way I'd never seen before. You own all of these. Since 1991, in various structures. The trusts and LLCs are on the following pages. This is. She looked up at me, and for the first time in 11 years, Renee looked at me like she was actually seeing me. Your worth. Patricia can walk you through the full picture if you'd like. She's available next week. Marcus had been sitting very still. Now he put both hands flat on the table, a gesture I recognized from when he was a boy and had broken something and was trying to figure out what to say. Dad, why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to know who you were when you thought I had nothing, I said. The same reason I never told anyone. The silence that followed was the longest silence I've sat through since Carol's last night in the hospital. The dinner last Saturday, Marcus said finally. Renee, the Bridgewood thing. Raymond. He wasn't talking to me anymore. He was working something out. We were going to have him sign a power of attorney. Marcus, Renee started. We were going to have my father, who apparently manages more assets than most regional banks, sign over his financial decision-making to a consultant we hired without asking him. His voice was very quiet. While he was grieving, 3 weeks after Mom died. We didn't know, Renee said. We didn't ask. He looked at her, and something passed between them that I wasn't meant to see. I didn't ask. I just assumed. He turned back to me. Dad, I'm sorry. I am genuinely, deeply sorry. Renee was quiet. She was looking at the folder in her hands, and I couldn't tell what she was thinking, and I'm not sure it mattered right then. I have one question, Marcus said. Did Mom know the whole time? From the first property, I said. She helped me negotiate it. He laughed then, a sudden, surprised sound. Of course she did. He shook his head. She never said a word. She was better at keeping secrets than I was, I said. She was better at most things. We talked for 2 more hours, not about assets or trusts or estate planning, about his mother, about the things she'd understood about both of us that we'd never said out loud, about the years he'd spent being a little ashamed of his parents' modest house and his father's old truck, and when that had started, and where it had come from, and what it said about the man he'd let himself become. Renee was quiet for most of it. She's a smart woman, and smart people know when the conversation isn't for them. Before they left, Marcus stood at the door and looked at me for a long moment. I want to fix this, he said, if you'll let me. I know you do, I said. I didn't promise him anything that night. Some things need to be earned slowly, the way good soil is built, a little at a time, over years. But I left the door open, which was more than I'd expected to do when I drove to that dinner with my flowers that no one put in water. 3 months later, I'm sitting on the back porch of my house, the same house Marcus and Renee wanted to sell, watching my granddaughter Lily help me plant the spring garden. She has Carol's hands, narrow and precise, and she moves through the seedlings with a care that makes me believe she'll do well at whatever she turns her attention to. Ben is inside doing homework. I can hear him through the open door, asking questions at the kitchen table the way his father used to when he was young. Marcus comes by twice a week now. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we just work on something around the house. The comfortable quiet of 2 people who've been through something together and come out the other side. Renee has been gracious in a way that costs her something, which is the only kind of grace that means anything. Raymond Holt has not returned. Patricia has helped me restructure the trust to ensure that Lily and Ben have what they need for education, security, and opportunity, without the weight of wealth handed to them before they've had the chance to understand what effort actually means. There are conditions tied to character and contribution, the same ones Carol and I talked about for years, sitting at our kitchen table while the ordinary world happened around us. The house still smells like Carol's perfume sometimes, usually in the early morning, when the light comes through the east windows at a particular angle. and everything goes very still. I think she would have liked how things turned out, not the confrontation, not the fear and the hurt of a son who didn't know his father, not any of that, but the talking, the honesty, the room that opened up afterward, the room where something real could finally grow. Some people spend their whole lives building walls to protect what they love. I spent 40 years building something different, something invisible. Not walls, but roots. Roots don't show, and they aren't impressive, and nobody writes about them in the financial press. But when the storm comes, they're the only thing that holds. I'm still here, still in my house, still drinking bad coffee and driving my old truck and raking my own leaves. And finally, for the first time in a very long while, I know exactly who was at the table with me and why they came. That's worth more than anything else I'll ever own. I've thought a lot about what really happened at that dinner table. Not the folder, not the numbers, not the look on Renee's face when she turned back to the first page and read it again. What I keep coming back to is something simpler than all of that. The choices we make in quiet moments when no one is watching and nothing feels urgent are the ones that define us in the loud moments when everything is. I spent 40 years waking up before dawn, working with my hands, asking careful questions, learning things nobody thought to teach me, and then doing it again the next day. Not because I had a plan to impress anyone, because it was the right way to live, because Carol and I decided early on that character was the only thing that couldn't be taken from you, and we tried to build our lives around that truth. That's not immoral. That's just what happened. What I've come to understand, sitting on this back porch watching Lily tend the garden, is that how you treat people when you believe they have nothing left to offer you is the most honest thing about you. Marcus and Renee treated me like a problem to be managed, not because they were evil people, but because they had slowly, over years of comfortable living, stopped asking the harder question. Not what can I get from this situation, but what kind of person do I want to be inside it? The mind that asks that second question is the one worth developing, not because it leads to wealth or recognition, but because it leads to a life you can actually stand behind. Intelligence without that question is just cleverness, and cleverness has a way of outsmarting itself, as Raymond Holt discovered when I closed the door in his face. Carol understood this better than anyone I've ever known. She was the one who reminded me, every time I felt the pull of resentment or pride, that the point was never to win. The point was to remain someone worth knowing. Integrity isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up quietly in the same place it always has and does the work. What Marcus did after that dinner took real courage. He didn't explain it away or negotiate around it. He looked at what he had done and called it by its name. That's harder than most people realize, and I don't think he could have done it without the foundation Carol and I tried to lay, even when we weren't sure he was paying attention. He was paying attention. He just needed the right moment to show it. I think about the people watching my story, and I wonder how many of you are carrying something like this. A relationship that drifted somewhere you didn't intend, a version of yourself you're not entirely proud of, a parent, a child, a partner you've reduced to a role instead of really seeing. It's not too late to place the folder on the table, not to prove anything, but to start the conversation you should have had a long time ago. The roots are still there. They just need tending.